So I think we have a few more minutes than foreseen because Erwin Kotler will not speak for 20 minutes, right? So we've got a bit of time. So I'm going to open the floor, but allow me just to add a couple of observations from this. I've often asked myself, or heard these questions about when and how would we know that there's a genocide and something terrible. And I just want to observe, it's very interesting for people to start, and with no disregard to historians present, invocations in time and dates. But from an international law perspective, actually, this idea of historical or paleontological justification is irrelevant. We had 5 people here at the first panel today who simply declared that they are Rohingya and that they are seeking for a minimum level of respect and dignity, and existing international law owes them a duty of respect as such. It doesn't matter whether it was 1823 or whatever was the starting date at some point. So we need to know that the really existing normative framework of contemporary international law, not just the Genocide Convention, but many other things. In fact, ironically, in 1992, the United Nations adopted the Declaration on the respective minorities, persons belonging to national, ethnic, religious, or linguistic minorities, in which the government of Myanmar participated. And in that, in the first article, is a duty to acknowledge the existence, self-identified by groups. So it's not, we don't need to go back to genocide as such. But even if we were to go back to the Genocide Convention, I would also like to just point out that the Genocide Convention is a treaty between states. The obligation is first and foremost upon states, not individual perpetrators. And that duty is inter pares, that is to say it's between, reciprocally, all the states. Therefore, there is a duty not only on each state, on this case, the state of Burma or Myanmar, not to commit or permit to be committed crimes within their territory or jurisdiction, but it is a duty on all the other states that are parties, on my country of Canada, on this country of Germany, not only not to commit it, but to hold other states' parties responsible for their duties. And to me, that is now the question. It's not only when and how did we know, but how do we respond? And that is a fundamental question here. I would hope that would come out of this conference. How are our governments responding to these facts? Those are my observations. Are there questions or comments from the floor? When you, I'll recognize you. Please identify yourself when you put your question. Is there a microphone? Oh, you've already got a microphone? Okay. We'll start with you, and can someone then bring a microphone to this gentleman?
I've been following the Rohingya genocide. I want to just say that I've read the, what do you call, some of the articles here, and say that the Tamils are still undergoing genocide. And it's not mentioned and never said by anybody, even in TV or anywhere. So I don't know why that the Tamils, I think Mr. Mauseng was there at the tribunal in Bremen. I was also present there. And I think the first gentleman, the first desk was also there, the first speaker, I think so. So, and to answer a question that how other states are perpetrating this genocide, for example, China, America, they also play a role in these countries to support and to promote this genocide sometimes, yeah? So how are you going to deal with big countries? Yeah, that's just the key point. That's the fundamental of the root, actually. We are beating the small boys, but the big boys are dancing around. So I go to manage that. Thank you.
Second question, the gentleman here in the front.
Yeah, shall I pass it on?
Yes,
first,
please, to
then?
this gentleman here, please.
Yeah, having talked to my Western colleagues
Can you identify yourself, please? Sorry.
Okay, my name is Gobi Ratnam. I'm a Tamil, but live in London. Having talked to my Western colleagues who are interested in human rights, they all know about what's happening in Rohingya. And even though they don't admit as a genocide, but they all know the injustice against them. But their justification is after a long time, there's a regime change and a democratization process in transition now. So you should kind of ignore or give low weightage to this. How do you address that issue?
We'll just take the third question to get the 3 on the floor.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Packer, I agree with you that we have to look at the atrocities that are committed now, the whole horrible situation. We have to try to identify, rectify, and say it can't go on like this. But I'm an historian myself, as I said, and I have to speak up for the historians. You have to, beyond and above what we are doing now, to look into the roots of the conflict. Unless we identify how did the conflict come about, what are the roots of it, we will not be able to devise measures to rectify it. I told you I have researched the Sri Lanka conflict, which is not solved yet because nobody wants to acknowledge the roots of the conflict. And I think historians have a duty to unearth that. They cannot rectify the situation, but they can maybe advise how can you begin to not stop the current horribleness, but to try to come to a solution and to start negotiating. Thank you.
Thank you. We have three comments and one or two questions. We'll come back for some others quickly. So, Gianni.
Yeah, let me respond to the last question first, and then the intervention issue that Gopi raised. Genocides are not conflicts. That is, the fundamental things about genocide is that genocides are not conflicts. If genocides were portrayed or framed as conflict, then the Nazi Party had the conflict with the German Jewry in the 1920s and 1930s. Genocides were one-directional, systematic destruction, not just killing, destruction. Lemkin, again, said it so clearly, thoroughly. It's actually, genocides are not about history. History, paleontological evidence, historical documentation, they are used and misused to justify and explain away why a particular group of vermin or cockroaches, as in Rwanda, or leeches, need to be exterminated from the body politics. So I think I would caution anyone, the media, the policymakers, anybody, to shield themselves from fully understanding the non-conflictual but unidirectional nature of genocidal persecution. On one hand, one group who say, we love northern Burma, northern Arakan, and we are part of the Burmese society at large. We want to live in safety. We want to live with our Rakhine brothers and others in peace. We want to continue to contribute to that society as our ancestors had done. And then on the other side say, you don't exist as who you say you are. You don't belong here. You are interlopers. In that situation, number one, dialogue and reconciliation are not possible. The Jews and the Nazi Party did not reconcile when Auschwitz were in operation. Yeah? And then second and finally,
Sorry, we'll continue. You had your question, comment. Let's continue.
On the question of intervention, I think it's if you look at the categorical failure of international community to intervene and stop and prevent or prevent the genocides since 1951. That's when the convention was ascended or ratified. We have an international system of states where state absolute sovereignties or neo-absolutist sovereignty and state interests, geopolitical and commercial interests, trumped human well-being. Finally, are we too stupid to believe that the Security Council, that is made up of 5 largest arms merchants in this world, will promote, protect human well-being? Think about it.
Professor Tognini.
I, I can only support what Gianni has been said. I think that what we are experiencing over the last many years, the fact that the impunity is something which is more important than observation of law. And the states are in fact guaranteeing to each other, when they have a position of power, the impunity for whatever is happening in another town, in another country. Now, the only point which could be seen now in order to stop at least the completion of the genocide would be really to see whether at least we could put a pressure into the international community as a part of the political priority to make our democracies credible, at least to give back the protected right to a protected homeland, not simply to continue to debate about the denomination of the crimes. Genocide is one of the expressions of the crimes against humanity. If we are not able at least to give back the right to a protected homeland, it means that we have abdicated as society to have a democratic society which could really pretend to guarantee the right of people. People are no more recognized as subjects of law and not simply the object of violation and then of impunity. Whether that pressure could be obtained is obviously a big challenge to all society, and that is an indicator of our capacity of being, say, humans, because in fact crimes against humanity are not crimes against the law, are crimes against the fact of human being. And that is what is Rohingyas case and Kachin are in fact requesting with other people to the international community.
Thank you. I want to come to the gentleman here. I promised I'd come back to you, so if you have a question. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank Penny Green that you highlight that there's genocide, and I could find a definition of modern life genocide is like to take the fundamental right back. A citizen should have a fundamental right, food, everything, okay? So as I seen one brother from Rakhine, he said that long time, Myanmar army or Myanmar government, they take their fundamental rights. They are not going to hospital. Even I have seen in the newspaper, women cannot go to the hospital because she's going to have a baby, and she's not allowed to go hospital, okay? So that means she's going to die. It has happened so many. There are a lot of examples, okay? So in this seminar, I have seen a lot of brothers and sisters. They are not agree with genocide. I mean, I feel really disappointed. If a human being, it's not a matter of who is ration, I mean the Rohingya or minority group or majority group. Those are humanity, okay? A human being, he has no right to leave their own country. They detach from their own country. And they killed. I have a lot of pictures, and you guys you guys seen the pictures in the internet. A lot of history happened in Myanmar. Why we cannot sit in one platform? There was a genocide, and it is too late. As I can say one translation which I learned in school said, the doctor has come, the patient has died before the doctor came. That means the genocide, we are saying genocide is too late. Already it's happened, and we didn't make any solution or any pressure on Myanmar government to make the right citizenship of Rohingya or give them the fundamental right, then it could be over. I mean, I don't know why we are having the same seminar, same
Thank you.
things.
I think we got your point.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone want to comment? Do you want to respond to that, Penny?
Yeah, just very briefly, I completely understand your frustration and feel it very much myself. that the warning signs were there. We've been talking about this for a number of years. It is only very, very recently that there's been an acceptance that this is genocide. And what does that mean now? What does it mean to call it genocide? For us, it's been important to name it because it's a very specific form of harm against a group. The specificity of the nature of the harm is against the group. This is what matters with genocide. And so we've won on that score. So a lot of people now accept that it's a genocide, but that's not enough. It's clearly not enough. And I think my colleague Louise Wise says, actually, this is only the beginning. And I think that that's tremendously important. And I think that we have to be extremely careful now, because in lots of ways, the Myanmar state has been successful. And it has experienced no repercussions. I think it's doing very well, and it's, you know, I mean, there's a sense of gloating. I think when I was in Bangladesh, Aung San Suu Kyi made her first triumphalist visit to northern Rakhine State. She arrived in a military helicopter flanked by generals and visited Rakhine State only after the vast majority had been forced to flee through killing and mass violence. They feel that they've won. I mean, they're cross with the international community for being sort of slapped across the knuckles a little bit. But that's all it's been, a slap across the knuckles. And so I think, you know, the onus is on us to exert as much pressure as we can on our own states to admonish in the most severe way the Myanmar government and the Myanmar military. And I don't think we should forget about the government. I know that there's been a sense in which people have said that it's the military that conducted the genocidal clearances, but Aung San Suu Kyi provided the cover. The military could not have done this without the rest of the international community have been somewhat in awe of Aung San Suu Kyi, even when they've witnessed her brutality, even when they've witnessed her absolute disregard for the human rights of the people of Myanmar. So I think we've got to be absolutely clear that any kind of sanctions are not simply against the military.
If I could just comment and a little bit disagree with you. First of all, I think the problem here is that though people in the room and maybe your scholarly community and some people we interact with are ready to call this genocide, as far as I understand, virtually no state in the world, as a matter of official policy, has called it genocide. I think President Macron, a couple of others, but my observation is that most governments in the world are bending over backwards not to call it genocide. And the reason they are trying not to call it genocide is because of the 150 plus states who are parties to the Genocide Convention would be under obligations to act. It's very easy to call it ethnic cleansing. There's no legal obligation to act in response to ethnic cleansing. Second of all, the distinction between the military Daw San Suu Kyi. In international law, it actually doesn't matter. The matter is state responsibility, which is a constituent element of international law and defines the state, by the way. So the question is not some people acting, a few rogue generals or even tens of thousands, even institutions. Who's responsible under the Genocide Convention? It is the state of Myanmar as a whole. And this is pursuant not only to incidents, but to policy. In my own work since 1992, you can just Google immediately, get online and see the public reporting of the United Nations Special. Professor Lee is only the most recent of a long line of them. There's 26 years of reporting publicly. Before that, Sadako Ogata, former UN High Commissioner for Refugees, was the confidential independent expert reporting on the situation. It's not public information, but states had that information. They knew that. So this is at least 30 plus years of consistent official reporting. So the question here is not actually our position here. This is a matter of moral conduct in civil society. It is actually an issue of states. And I think we really need to be really crystal clear about this and the specific responsibility. And I would just like to mention, to go back to something Professor Ong said at the end of his remarks, which was, it's about land. You said something about land. And I think we should not underestimate the interest here of states in the potential bonanza of the economic bonanza of access to the consumer and the developmental potential of Myanmar, and specifically the access to northern Rakhine land. When we understand this must be the context. I know we've gone late. Zani, I give you the last word, but I know Professor Ong also wants to say something.
Uncle, I think in 2016, October or November, Sir Geoffrey Nice, who was the persecutor in the case of Milosevic and deputy persecutor for the entire Yugoslavia Tribunal, wrote a short but very powerful essay in the Foreign Policy magazine where he spelled out potential criminal responsibility and culpability of Aung San Suu Kyi by name. In this day and age, because Genocide Convention is not just a non-binding resolution like a responsibility to protect, because it is an interstate treaty, even if the Burmese military or the state of Burma opted out after having ratified the Convention of 1948, opted out of a clause that would require the state to send the heads of state held accountable for atrocities to the World Court. Other states are obligated. It doesn't matter, like you don't have to be. A particular state does not have to be a signatory to this convention. That is the crux of this interstate treaty. The world has the responsibility. The world of international states have the responsibility to intervene. That is why I think I am deeply disappointed with the leading human rights organizations, Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, because they are finessing the truth. They are not uttering the truth as they, in quote, discover through their documentation. What they are doing through their reporting is what I would call strategic positioning, so that their voices would be considered acceptable, not radical, because radical meaning within the system of state that is unprepared, that lacks the political power to intervene to stop genocidal situations. If you say genocide, you are disinvited from meeting, you are no longer credible. So Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have since Rwanda been complicit in the genocide. Yeah? Amnesty International finally, about 2 months ago, a month ago, woke up from 40 years of coma. In 1978, July, Far Eastern Economic Review, July 9th or 10th, published an article entitled Burma's Style of Apartheid, 1978 July. Amnesty International issued a report saying apartheid conditions when 90% of the population have been emptied out forcibly and violently. So we have a situation, my friends, where leading international human rights NGOs are complicit in the genocide by refusing to call the crime by its own name.
We've gone way past our time limit, but I will defer to our senior academic, Professor Ong.
I want to backtrack a little bit and give you a different perspective looking from outer space to down. I was a young boy when the Japanese invaded Burma. I say invaded in quotes. I heard about the massacres of Christians after they finished their midnight service at the Christmas service in the little towns of Myanmar and Bogale. I was a little boy, 8 or 9 years old. I mentioned that. When we got married in 1958, I took my bride back to Burma, and we rode the train from Kalor to Rangoon, and right below Kalor is the town of Batu Myo, OTS, an officer training school, not the military academy yet. A young man wandered into our compartment. He was really after my wife, officer. And I peeked into his notes, and I was amazed what the military officer training school was teaching them. They are advocating, saying that the army is of Burmans, and the army has to take the country under control. That scared the daylights out of me. How many Christians are there in the Burmese army today? Don't answer that. Tell me when you have the facts. How many Kachins are there in the Burmese army? How many Karens are there? 0. Major General Kit, I believe. I cannot remember these names. It's in my book. About 1990-something, said, in the next generation, in the next decade is 10 years, the only Karen you find will be in the museum. What does that mean? Is that not genocide? You answer that question.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the panel. I don't know who, we're going to hear from Professor Kotler now. I think there's a video show. Thank you.